Alright, what's up you guys? This is Devin with Central Effects Studios, back with another video, and it is an exciting time for Canon. Canon has now confirmed specs on their new mirrorless Canon EOS R5. Now this is an upgrade to the Canon EOS R. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's Canon's first full-frame mirrorless camera. Then they came out with the EOS RP, a smaller, cheaper version. The EOS R was a good camera. It wasn't like the world's next 5D Mark II. And then the EOS RP was just really a competitor to Sony's A7 III. I know you might be saying, well, where's Nikon and all of this? They had the Z6 and Z7, but financially it didn't pan out like they thought it would, but there's still some solid cameras. So now Canon's in the world and they want to shine bright like a diamond, as Rihanna would say, with their new EOS R5, make a splash in the mix. And it kind of works with their, I would say, business scheme, because back when the 5D Mark II came out, and I think in about 2008, what they did was they were like, okay, we have this new wave of full frame cameras, we can add video to it. Video will be revolutionary. When they tend to have a revolutionary idea, and it wasn't, based off of the evidence that I've seen, Canon didn't have it like this main new idea. I think that Canon thought in their brain that people would still like the DSLRs for photography. It was just a I wouldn't say backhanded idea, but a last second idea, because the way you see it in the 5D Mark II, you can tell the video is not like a big part of the actual DSLR as far as activating it. Like, you really gotta look into the menus and then press the live view button and then press the set button and then you got video. But if you didn't know the EOS or the 5D Mark II had video, it would be kind of hard to find it. As a matter of fact, when I got my 5D Mark II and I got it used in default mode, you couldn't find the video. But I say all that to say, it wasn't the biggest thing on Canon's mind. They had full frame 1080p video, and then it shocked the world with that full frame sensor. Because usually people who shoot cinema, they shoot the smaller Super 35 sensor. But a lot of people appreciated that extra background blur, that extra light quality, and the ability to use fast lenses on a huge sensor like a full frame sensor, which was bigger than any 35mm sensor at the time, and in a small form factor and a cheaper camera. Now we're moving on to the EOS R5, where it's showing similar aspects. For example, this is the first Canon camera, I think ever, to present 8K. Now you might think to yourself, well, Devin, isn't Canon pretty much crippling all their settings for their cinema line? Well, it doesn't look like that's the case here, because not only did Canon come out with a statement for this EOS R about how good the specs were, but they had to double down and confirm that, hey, we're not crippling this. It's full sensor readout, 8K, I believe, and it's also 30 frames per second. It's not a crippled frames per second on the 8K like the 5K is on the 5D Mark III. It's just like it cripples it. You don't have sound or something like that. You don't have some main feature about the video in the 5D or the 1DX Mark III. So a lot of people were questioning whether or not this 8K was true 8K, true sensor readout, all this other stuff. Is it cropped? Is it not cropped? Will you have dual pixel autofocus? And Canon is confirming all of this stuff. You're gonna have dual pixel autofocus. You're gonna have 30 frames per second. I don't know about the 24 frames per second, but a lot of this stuff I think can be done in a firmware update if they haven't already. But they're confirming this stuff straight out of camera that, hey, you're gonna have this stuff. I think they're also going to be bringing out C-Log. But let's go over some of the things that they confirmed on the website. All right, so the first thing on the website that they confirmed is the new sensor and a new processor, which makes sense. If you're going from the EOS R to the EOS R5, the EOS R has a 30 megapixel sensor, and it doesn't shoot that many frames per second, definitely not consistently. It's a pretty slow camera, as a matter of fact, because Sony has a lot of competing cameras, like I said, competing cameras that can shoot faster, like the A9. Like, their mirrorless technology is stronger than Canon when it comes to processing memory and stuff like that, or so we thought, because now this EOS R5 is touted to be 12 frames per second with the mechanical shutter and 20 frames per second with the silent shutter, as they say, or I would say the electronic shutter. That makes more sense to me. But you have all of these new specs, and that begs the question: where did Canon hide all this new technology? Because this camera should be coming out sometime within the year or next year, depending on this coronavirus and all this pandemic stuff. So the next thing on the list will be the 8K RAW. Not only 8K, they give an 8K RAW. I'm pretty sure they're gonna have a more compressed version of that 8K as well if they're giving you 8K RAW. But 8K RAW is not going to be easy to shoot, and not many cameras on the market right now have 8K, let alone Sony and Nikon. So what kind of form factor are you putting this on? Like, what kind of format? You know, they say they're going to have some card formats, and I'm going to get it in just a second. But that begs the question: is this camera going to be able to handle 8K? Because a lot of 8K cameras that have just came out have fans on them, especially if they're smaller. The smaller they are, the bigger the fan, well, not bigger the fan, but the more likelihood of them having a fan to basically cool down the camera from all that processing from the 8K. So, is this 8K going to slow us down or speed us up and make us happy? Now it says 4K at 120 frames per second. 120 frames per second on 4K would probably be worse on your memory than 8K in a standard format, like 24p or 30p. You see what I'm saying? Because think about it this way: 1080p at 60 frames per second is worse on my memory card, it seems, than 4K at 30 or 24 frames per second. When you're doubling the frames per second every frame, that ends up being a little bit worse on the 1080p side than the 4K side. I lost a lot more memory when I was trying to shoot 1080p at 60 frames per second than I was at 4K, 24 frames per second. So you have to understand that 4K at 120 frames per second, oh, that's going to kill whatever, 8K can do at 30 frames per second. Now, I don't know about the raw aspect. The raw aspect of 8K throws a caveat in there. But all I'm saying is this camera's going to be trucking a lot of memory baseline to its internals, and will this make this heat up or not? Because I know Sony had a lot of problems just with downscaled Sony had a lot of problems with downscaled 6K, and I don't even, they were having heat problems and heat issues and battery issues. Now Canon has never, to their credit, had battery issues that people had complained about in the past, but when it comes to video, battery gets drained fast on DSLRs, and that's just a fact. So mirrorless cameras use a lot more to present the digital feed to you. To present that EVF to you, that takes power from the battery. To present that screen to you on the back, that takes power. Whereas on the DSLR, you don't have to use power to send the reflected image to your eye. It's just a printed prism on the inside, and it sends that information to your eye just off of a reflection. That's why the DSLR is so big. Digital single lens reflex camera, but the mirrorless camera doesn't have that mirror. You have to present everything digitally, and it all takes power. So I think they might have a bigger battery pack for this. I don't know. They didn't say anything, or I didn't see anything on my initial research from Canon about a bigger battery. All right, so you got Ibis now. Now, I know Canon has not had Ibis before, and I believe they said something about changing the type of Ibis that they were going to be doing and making it more safe for the sensor. Because a lot of pros thought that Ibis, when it first came out on Sony cameras, that it would tear up the quality of the camera over time, because your sensor keeps moving. If your sensor keeps moving, it possibly would damage something with the sensor or the internals over time. Because DSLR sensors don't move. So that's also something to think about. So they said they're going to have some kind of different specs when it came to Ibis. It wouldn't work it would work the same way, but in a different way. I don't know. It's kind of like that AA filter thing, where they were like, oh, we're just going to have an AA cancellation filter instead of not putting the AA filter on there in the first place. So that's a lot to worry about. Okay, dual pixel autofocus, but they're claiming that the dual pixel autofocus won't be stripped from the 8K. That's what everybody is concerned about. Dual pixel autofocus, for those of you who don't know, I'm pretty sure you already know if you're watching this video, but let me just explain. Dual pixel autofocus is Canon's pretty much, I would say, legendary autofocus when it comes to video. You can click the screen and it almost perfectly and quickly gets you a nice looking focus pull from focus to focus or subject to subject. And it's just amazing what Canon can do with their autofocus. And Sony is the only company that I think is closest to Canon when it comes to autofocus in video. And the last thing is the dual card slots. I dropped my board. Last thing is dual card slots. You got a UHS-2 SD card slot and a CF Express card slot. I think this is real. I think they're gonna do it. I mean, they're confirming it. But my thing is that is the CF card as slow as the SD UHS-2 card? I think the UHS-2 SD card is slower than a CF Express card. Excuse me. It's so many CF cards. CF Express, CF, whatever, you know. But you have to think about this in the whole aspect of what is this camera going to concede? It seems too good to be true to a lot of us. And they're confirming this specs. Hey, don't leave Canon, because we're going to blow your mind away. And based off these specs, that begs the reason what's going to happen with Sony, because Sony was supposed to come out with their beast of a video camera, and it seems like this Eos R5 is leaning on video specs more than, you know, your photography specs. I didn't even mention it's supposed to have like a 45 megapixel sensor, trucking 12 frames per second mechanical and 20 frames per second visually on the electronic shutter side, excuse me. But it begs to think why is Canon just now bringing out this technology, but at the same time, why is it? Why do we want to trust them? You know, as far as what they're saying. And the last thing I want to reiterate is Sony's A7S III. Sony's A7S III has not remotely came out yet. A lot of people are thinking it's coming out soon. I don't even know. Sony hasn't confirmed it as of today. Sony hasn't confirmed an A7S III. I know that Sony's working on something, and they tease you like they're working on something, but like, aren't they working on an A7S III? That was one of the most popular video cameras ever, especially as mirrorless is concerned, because it had a 12 megapixel sensor, but that low light ability was groundbreaking. I know Canon and Nikon couldn't stand up to that low light ability with the Sony. You know, Sony makes a lot of Nikon sensors, so Nikon definitely couldn't compete, especially if they know what kind of technology they're sending Nikon already as far as the sensor is concerned. And it was just hard for us to believe. Well, it's hard for us to believe that Sony's not trying to come up with something, but a lot of the people that I've researched, a lot of my favorite YouTubers are saying that Sony might not even be able to compete with Canon's new beast. I'm done with Central Effects Studios, guys. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.